Okay, I know I'm the last speaker of the day for a very long day, so I'm not going to take too much time with you guys. I also want to say that I have not been instrumental in anything so far as policy is concerned. We at IGPC are an independent think tank, as all of you guys know, charged with the idea of doing some research and acting as a policy advisory along with other people. And we have been giving our inputs as the government has asked us to over a period of time. I just want to build a little bit on our previous speaker. And I'm going to do some loud thinking here as I'm talking, because the previous speakers, Dr. Roy's thoughts are actually very, very pertinent for an industry like this. And are probably going to find reflection in whatever policy ultimately does get formed. So let me start out with the policy statement that the government seems to be looking at. And before I dive into this, let me make the disclaimer that this reflects entirely the opinion of IGPC, my opinion. This is nothing to do with the government. This is what we are sharing with the government, but what the government does ultimately will be a function of what the previous speaker has just told us about. So these are the four top things that the government seems to be thinking about: how to financialize gold, how to create gold as an asset class. These two things are very much part of the budget statement that was made earlier this year. CAD issues that Dr. Roy mentioned very clearly have been a part, are a part, will continue to be a part, given that we run a $30–40 billion deficit every year on gold. And how you can add value to the economy, make it more inclusive. In fact, perhaps that could be a key area for the policy making for the government. So far as we can make out, there are these 5 key pillars on the basis of which any policy will happen, that the Department of Economic Affairs, the Department of Commerce and Industry seem to be thinking about. First is the gold monetization scheme and its attendant metal loans, savings accounts, and so on. The second is refinery, jewelry making, and trade. The third is banking and bullion banking, India good delivery standards, and then the spot exchange. Starting off with the spot exchange on the right, the idea is that there should be a transparent mechanism for buying and selling of gold for different stakeholders across the value chain. And probably the thinking is most advanced in this particular area. I'm aware that some parts of the industry have some reservations about this, but my sense, as far as I can make out, is that the government is reasonably convinced that it is something to go forward with, and it should be there in the policy framework that comes out in the near future, is my hope. On the gold monetization scheme, given that we import all our gold, this is probably a fairly critical part of the overall scheme that comes about, any policy framework that comes about, because when you're importing 800 tons of gold and 600 or 500 tons of it is going into jewelry, money out of circulation, whatever you can bring back into circulation, especially if gold is no longer a hedge, as Dr. Roy was telling us that it is not. If gold is no longer a hedge, then it should be more possible, more feasible actually to bring back some of this gold into the system, and that can have a positive effect on the CAD. So any changes in the gold monetization scheme that is under operation is on the agenda for the government. We know that the scheme, which was launched in November 2015, has not exactly been very successful. Total of around 15 tons of gold which have come back into the system out of the more than 14,000 estimated tons of gold jewelry which are lying in private hands. That's a fairly large number, and if indeed it's no longer a hedge and people are no longer using gold in the way that they were, then it should not be very difficult to bring it back into the system, and that should help all around, including in the CAD issues. And aligned to both the spot exchange and the gold monetization scheme is the idea of standards, India good delivery standards. We don't have one in the country. One of the earlier speakers talked about the fact that the government is working with BIS to try and create a standard which might be made in India but could be accepted internationally. Very much a work in progress, but that seems to be the way that the thinking in the government is proceeding. And let us see which way it runs. Critical to all of this, of course, will be the banking system, which is sitting right in the middle of this entire process, bringing all the different actors together, whether it's the spot exchange, the monetization scheme, the refiners, the jewelers, and exporters and everything. So how will the banking system be integrated into this entire process, which brings all of it together? Which remains to be seen. And here there would need to be particular changes which encourage or incentivize the bankers to take gold as a business, not just as something which is mandated by the government. You know, the bank should feel that there's something in it for us to start doing more better business in gold, a higher scale of business. And going back again to the idea of exports and jewelry making, we do indeed make great jewelry and we need to export. So there will be something in the policy. We are aware that at least a couple of ministries, Ministry of Commerce for sure, is very, very engaged and with the idea of how to create that market, help people to export more and not just to the Indian diaspora. So those are the 5 main pillars, I think, on which the policy will take shape, should take shape, as per our thinking at IIGC. What is IIGC's view on all of this? So this is something that I have shared earlier, and I'm going to repeat that again. So long as the goals are reasonably clear, which is financialization, gold as an asset class, minimize CAD, current account deficit, and to add value to the economy in different ways, then from a policy perspective, there are 2 very, very critical things that whatever changes are made, one should think through the interlinkages to other aspects. So if you're creating a spot exchange, there are interlinkages to standards, there are interlinkages to the gold monetization scheme, there are interlinkages to refining and the banking system. If you are trying to make a change to the gold monetization scheme, you need to be thinking about the delivery standards, you need to be thinking about the refiners, you need to be thinking about the banking system. So any change in any one part needs to be very clear about what are the attendant required changes on the other pillars. Without that, it will not work. So that's one part. The other part is that policy making tends to be complicated as it is. And if something has to work, then the lesser the number of changes that one makes to try to achieve the goal, the better it is from a policy making perspective, because changing policy in the government is a hard task as it is. You know, you have to go through so many departments, you have to make so many changes in the clauses, and then some other people have to sign off on it, and maybe there are some changes which are required to be made in the law, so it has to go to the parliament. Maybe there are some constitutional changes because you want to change something in Schedule 7. So the operating principle of any policy change has to be the minimum necessary change. How can I make the minimum number of changes so that one gets to the goal which is enunciated? And that's a challenging task. We don't know how that will play out, simply because the industry is a complicated industry. That should give you an idea of how complicated it is. I'm not even going to begin to try to go through that slide. This is simply to show you that your industry is a very complicated industry. And what will work or not work will depend on how those different things come together. How they are integrated, how the spot exchange is integrated with the gold monetization scheme, is integrated with the banking system, with the standards, with the recycled gold, allocated gold, unallocated gold, and so on and so forth. So when is this policy likely to come? Because we've been talking about it for the last 3 years or more. Again, purely my opinion, my sense is that we are in the final stretch. Hopefully something should come in the next 6 months. But in these cases, one never knows. So with that, I'm going to end my talk. I know that you guys are waiting for the next part, which is probably a heck of a lot more interesting than my talk. But thank you very much for the opportunity. And we at IGPC would welcome any inputs that you might have for us that you think we should know, because we are always willing to look at it. Ultimately, we will take our call on what we want to tell the government, but we do look forward to any inputs from any and all of you. Thank you very much for your time.
Hey.